The Born Latter-day Saint Hollywooders, Ryan Gosling, Katherine Heigl, Aaron Eckhart, Amy Adams, Dustin Lance Black. The athletes, Jimmer Fredette, Taysom Hill, Bryce Harper. The musicians, Dan Reynolds, David Archuleta, Brandon Flowers. Out of this list, I think the only one who is fully famous and fully a member is Flowers, who I guess needs to teach a class of some sort, perhaps how to stay in the church when you've seen how unboring life can be.
Mornings are better with a warm beverage, even for Latter-day Saints. Meet Postum, the ideal coffee alternative and proud sponsor of This Week in Mormons podcast. Spotted on the coffee aisle at Smith's Grocery or at your local nearby store. Can't locate it? No worries. Order it at postum.com. Explore delicious recipes to tailor your Postum experience. Start your day off right with Postum.
Hello, welcome to This Week in Mormons, the Sisters Edition, Twim Sisters, as we call ourselves. I'm your host, Ariane Smith.
And I'm your host, Tiffany Hales. And we have a special guest tonight.
Yay, yay! We've got our third sister.
Hello, everyone.
This is Ciara Birch. Now, we teased this last time we were together. We talked about how when we recorded in September, we were taking the show on the road because we are not in Idaho right now. We are visiting Ciara, and she lives in the lovely sunshine state of California, also known as California.
And whenever we get together, if you've listened to us for a while, whenever the three of us are together, we force her into podcasting with us.
Well, it just happens that every time we're together, it's like our week to podcast. I don't think we've had to like juggle the schedule around. It's just happened.
It's actually, we've been very lucky because we love having her come on with us.
This is my claim to fame.
Now, if you also remember, she lovingly calls herself our apostate sister because she is no longer a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
But she never stopped being Mormon.
No. But she identifies culturally as a Mormon.
Yes. I mean,
would you say you identify culturally?
I think that's fair.
Okay.
That's a hard thing to get rid of. So she will always be. Anyway, she is always so nice and such a good sport to do this with us.
Yes.
And we have fun conversations with her always.
Exactly.
So we are here, and also we are making her try Postum.
Exactly.
As you do.
So Postum is our sponsor this year. So I put together this Postum drink. So before we try it, let me tell the listeners what we're drinking. If you have been listening to us for a while, first of all, anytime I have a guest, when I'm doing a Twim Taffy edition, if I have a guest come on and that we're not just some distance away, I make them drink the Postum. And I've been trying to come up with new ways to use the Postum, new drinks to use the Postum. I've just kind of been exploring the Postum. So,
and you've come up with some great concoctions.
I've come up with some great concoctions. Our favorite so far has been the chocolate almond.
Yes.
We have actually loved the chocolate almond, and you've been drinking that all summer, haven't you?
I love it.
So I brought the chocolate Postum to California in my suitcase. It is TSA approved. You can bring it. You can bring it in a suitcase. TSA won't get mad at you. And so I decided this time, I thought, you know what? I want to try something with orange because I love orange and chocolate together. The orange sticks that you get at Christmas time that are covered with the chocolate. Oh my gosh, those are like my favorite things.
Do you love an orange chocolate combo?
I do love an orange chocolate.
We all
the
do.
Chocolates that you break apart.
Yes.
Love those.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh yeah, the big orange. Yeah, exactly.
I get those. I put them in our stockings every year.
Okay. So let me show you the drink.
That is what it smells like.
So this is the first time you've ever made this?
I've never made this before.
Orange flavor.
Okay. I thought this was something tried and true.
Oh, no. So let me explain to the listeners what I put in. I started with water and chocolate Postum. Now, normally I would put this on ice, but we're at a place where we don't have ice tonight. So
there's a lack of ice.
There's a lack of ice. So we don't have ice. So I've got the water and the chocolate Postum. I threw in some orange extract, a little stevia to sweeten it up because the Postum isn't sweetened. And then I put in fresh grated orange peel. And of course, I've got the cold foam creamer on top. So,
and it smells good.
Ladies, let's cheers.
Okay.
Cheers.
And let's drink up.
Okay, I like it.
Chocolate orange.
Chocolate orange.
It tastes like chocolate orange.
Wow, it really...
I want some of this cream. It's not coming.
Okay.
Staying.
Okay, I got
a little bitter aftertaste.
Yeah, a little bitter aftertaste.
That must be the orange.
Well, you know what?
Orange zest.
Here's what I think it is.
This is the stevia?
I think it's the orange extract. I think I put in.
Man.
I think if I were to make this again,
Put in too much.
I'm not sure I'd put in the orange extract. I
Oh.
think maybe I would just put in the orange zest, because when I zested that orange, it smelled pretty good.
It did.
I think I would just put in the orange zest. I don't think
Mhm.
I'd put in the orange extract. I
You know
think
what's
just
really
the
good
orange
is this
stick.
cream.
Oh, I
That's
know. Cold foam cream. I'll send it home with you if you want. Do you want me to send you the cold foam? I can't take it back to Idaho.
You know what? I'll take it. I'll see if Colin wants to use it on his tea.
Okay.
You've brought her onto the cream.
This is pretty
But-
good though.
Yeah,
Okay.
it actually tastes like
It's good.
It tastes like the chocolate oranges you get
It
at Christmas
does.
time.
It does taste like a chocolate orange.
Okay, I am a little surprised.
You've
but
done it again.
I've done it again. But yeah, I think the little bitter taste is the extract.
Mhm.
That would make sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. There you go. New recipe.
This is my first time trying post them, so
And
All right.
She didn't die.
She didn't die.
I'm here to
It's
tell
actually fine, right?
Okay.
Good.
Well, before we get into stories, shall we talk about the Grand California Adventure?
Oh yeah.
Okay, we are only one day into the California Adventure. Ariane and I got here about 24 hours ago.
Mhm.
So I have to tell you, listeners, my sisters are very good sports, because when I tell you what I made them do today, one of the top things on my Grand California Adventure was I wanted to go to the Fashion District in LA. And if you've never been to the Fashion District in LA, I can't even begin to describe the Fashion District. It's 107 blocks, and it has everything you can imagine, from clothing to shoes. And a good third of it is fabric stores and craft stores and jewelry stores. And it's got Santee Alley, which has just like everything in the world you can imagine. A lot of it is very culturally oriented. Would that be the would that be the
I think you could
the-
say
of
that.
the right way
That's the
to
right way to
to
phrase
say it.
that.
we weren't really their culturally their target audience, but that's not why we went there. We went there because I was in search of fabric. I am going to do this contest called Make It Yourself with Wool, and I'm going to make a wool coat and wool dress and enter this contest. And so we were in search of wool fabric. So I drug these ladies. We got our 10,000 steps today just in the Fashion District. I drug these ladies to no less than probably 20 different fabric shops in the Fashion District, and they were quite good sports.
Well,
It was fun.
We were trained well.
Explain to the listeners why you were trained well.
The two of us, well, you two probably,
Yes.
spent half of our childhood in a fabric store because our mom was a seamstress.
Like a serious seamstress.
Like hours and hours and hours back in the 80s in fabric stores. We used to play hide and seek in the bolts of fabric.
I got lost.
More than once.
Yeah.
More
Yeah.
than once.
So we were talking today about how much more pleasant this experience is in 2024 when we have smartphones. We found a place to sit at one point because
Yes.
our feet were tired. And we were
While
just
I
like-
was cruising the fabric
we
store.
were like showing each other stuff on our phones and talking about what shows we watched lately. It's much easier to entertain yourself
Very much
in
so.
Very true.
2024.
So yes, this was kind of a throwback to our mom and doing the sisters fabric shopping together, although I was the one that was doing all the shopping. And I got incredible fabric to make 2 different outfits, and I'm so totally stoked. So thank you, ladies, for indulging me today.
It was very fun.
Okay.
It was fun.
Do we want to tell them what else is on our California agenda?
Yes, we
Yes.
found the most amazing thing ever, which we found tickets to a Sound of Music sing-along at the Hollywood Bowl
Where costumes are encouraged.
that we'll be going to tomorrow night, which we all love the Sound of Music, and this could be the best people watching of our lives.
Hey, does Peggy still have her lederhosen?
That's a very good
It's probably in
question.
Arizona with her if she does.
I doubt that is still in this house. We're at my in-laws' house.
Exactly. Her mother-in-law had leader.
There used to be some lederhosen. I really wish I could locate that now. It's been about a decade since I've heard mention of it. So I know. And then we're doing like a studio tour tomorrow.
Mhm.
And then on Sunday, we're going to go to Griffith Park and hike and, you know,
It's going to be a hot one.
all the LA things.
We might want to end with the beach.
Okay.
So it's a good time.
It is, yes. It's been a year, a little over a year since we last did this. In fact, the last time we recorded the podcast was the last time we were together. So
Mhm.
we always have a blast when we're together. We have a good time. So
Yes, we do.
all right. Well, since we're here to do some news, should we do some news?
Sure.
Let's do some news.
Okay, well, it looks like I have the first story tonight, which is just this week, the church released its 2025 youth theme. First of all, it is hard to believe that in less than 4 months, it is going to be 2025. That's kind of mind-blowing to
Yeah, I
me.
don't care for
We
that.
are halfway through this decade. How did that happen?
We're a quarter through. No, we're halfway through.
We're
You're
halfway
right.
through.
I
Yeah.
was thinking century.
Well, I guess we have to. I guess we technically have to get through 2025
you're
to be
right.
halfway through.
No,
but
you're right. No, our dishwasher broke recently at our house, my husband and I, and we realized that our kitchen was remodeled before we bought the house.
Yes.
But in about 2005. And we were doing the math and we were like, that's almost 20 years. This dishwasher should be breaking. Like,
Accurate.
can you believe 2005 was 20 years ago?
That's just mind blowing.
Yeah.
So, anyway, here is the new youth theme for 2025, and it was introduced by both the Young Women's General President and the Young Men's General President, and it is called "Look Unto Christ." It is based on Doctrine and Covenants, section 6, verses 36, which reads, "Look unto me in every thought, doubt not, fear not." And so, as with prior youth themes, parents and leaders are encouraged to teach principles from this theme at home and at church. Chances are this theme will be used in many a girls' camp and youth activities and youth conferences. It will also be emphasized during the for the Strength of Youth conferences that are held worldwide every year. And what they always do with the theme is they have a logo and music. Now, the logo and music is not available yet, but that will be coming in November on the church website. So,
Okay.
now you know what your teenage girls, at least what their, in theory, what their leaders will be focusing on
Yes.
next year.
Yes. Sounds like a good theme.
Okay.
I approve. Okay.
All right.
I have the next story. This is kind of in relation. It was an article by Jana Reese in the Tribune, and it is in kind of in honor of President Nelson's 100th birthday, which, we celebrated last week. She, did this survey several years ago. Well, she did it in 2022 and 2023, and it's called the Next Mormon Survey 2. She's done a couple of these over the years. Anyway, she did this survey, and when she did this survey, part of the survey that she did was asking members of the church what their favorite changes were that President Nelson had made.
Because he's made a lot.
He's made a lot. So they narrowed it down to a list of 15 that they asked the members about, because they were like, well, we got to narrow this down. And then they had them, they were able to, from there, from the questions that they asked in the survey, to rank these 15 by most popular change to least popular changes that he's made, or, the ones people cared less about to what they cared most about. So would you like to know the winner? Winner, chicken dinner.
Winner, chicken dinner. What is the number one change that President Nelson has done that we will all revolt?
This will surprise
if it changes again.
This will surprise no one. It is 2-hour church.
Yes.
That was the number one
Amen.
most popular change everybody loved. So, but this list was so interesting.
I have to tell you, then Sierra looks like she wants to speak.
Oh, no, I have, 2-hour church. I had forgotten he did that because
she forgot because she left before she got to enjoy 2-hour church.
Know.
It's tragic.
She
might have stayed at 2 hours.
Let's not go that far.
Just kidding.
I was sitting in Sunday school last week, and I kid you not, I thought to myself as I was sitting in Sunday school, I was like, how did I do 3-hour church?
I don't know how we did it.
I don't know either.
Never go back. As a primary teacher, I have 5, 6, and 7-year-olds in my class for about 25 minutes, and it is perfect. If I had to fill any more time with those kids, I don't know how they did it.
I don't know how they did it either.
How did we used to do that?
I don't know.
So anyways, but this was really interesting to see where things fell on the ranking and where personally my things fell. So
okay.
I will tell you the top 5. I'll tell you the top 5.
Okay.
I'll tell you the bottom few, and then I will tell you if I had to pick my top 3.
Okay. Okay.
So,
I like that.
Okay. So top 5. First most popular was 2-hour church.
Okay.
Second most popular was home-based, home-centered learning. Come follow me, the home-based plan. Third most popular was using the full name of the church, referring to the church by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints instead of Mormon.
Okay.
Fourth most popular was missionaries calling home.
Oh.
I was surprised that was, I would think that would be number 2, but there's probably not enough moms taking this survey. Like, I guarantee if this survey was done solely by missionary moms, that would be up in the top 2.
It would be up in the top 2.
Anyway, number 5 is parents allowed to go into youth interviews.
Uh-huh.
So that's the top 5
Okay.
ranking. The least favorite, which are just like, not like people didn't like them, they just didn't rank high on the list.
They weren't popular.
Yes. One was ministering changes. People were very like ambivalent about, like, didn't particularly care for it. The other was renaming the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Even though members appreciated using the full name of the church, they did not so much appreciate the Motab
becoming the Tab
Cats. So, and then also kind of unpopular was discontinuing the pageants.
Oh.
You know, that makes me sad because I love a good kitschy
You
pageant.
miss pageants.
I know.
Yeah, I would love to go see a pageant.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, so what are your rankings,
So this is,
Ariane?
if I personally, some that were lower down that aren't in the top 5 would have been in my top 3. Personally, my top 1 definitely would have been 2 Hour Church.
Okay.
Number 2 for me would probably be the changes in the temple to be more, inclusive of women.
Yes.
And now we have a recent shortening up of the ceremony too.
Exactly.
So, and number 3 for me would be cutting our ties with Boy Scouts of America. I feel very strongly about that, especially now that I have a boy. So,
I am going to have to say that I agree with your top 3 because 2 Hour Church, yes. I love the new temple ceremony.
I was surprised that the temple ceremony didn't rank higher. It was number 9 on the list.
Yeah, that surprises me.
I would have thought it would have been in the top 5 for sure because those were some pretty significant changes.
They were significant changes.
Especially for the women of the church.
Exactly. And you couple those changes with the recent changes that removed a lot of the repetitiveness. And now it is like boom, 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 boom. There is no time to fall asleep if you go into an endowment session. You are just boom, boom, boom.
Now, she did do this survey before the most recent changes, but after the wording changes a lot. So,
and I do also agree with you on the Boy Scouts of America. My husband has been he's perpetually in Young Men's. He perpetually will always be in Young Men's. And just to have to deal with all of those scouting requirements. And the worst part that we had to deal with was Friends of Scouting, raising thousands of dollars of money that went to the Boy Scouts while the young women got a 0. So yeah, cutting ties with Boy Scouts. I'm there with you.
Yes. Anyways, it was a very interesting article. I love a survey. I love a good survey. So.
Okay. Was that a Jana Reese?
That was a Jana Reese survey. She likes a good survey too.
Did I tell you that my friend is working, helping her a research assistant for her latest book?
No.
My friend that lives in Short Creek.
Oh, how fun!
She's being a research assistant for the next book.
Am
I not close enough to the mic?
I think you need to get closer to the mic because we want people to hear you.
I have a friend that's helping Jana Reese research her next book. I don't know what the topic is.
I want to know what it's about. Give us the inside scoop. We'll get it.
I will have to ask her. She told me, I think, and I forgot.
Yeah. In fact, I need to remind Ariane when she talks, she got to get.
Oh yeah.
We are in tight quarters tonight. So, all right, Ciaran, we gave you the next story.
All right, they let me choose. They let me.
I would
they
let
me
you
choose.
This is right up your alley.
I am a nerd about politics, so I chose the politics story. Donald Trump divides Arizona's crucial Latter-day Saint vote. Traditionally, Republican members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints balked at the former president in 2020, helping Joe Biden win a key swing state. Will they do so with Kamala Harris?
Ooh. That's the big question.
Right up my alley. So just some numbers here, which I thought was interesting. Joe Biden won 18% of Arizona's Latter-day Saint votes in 2020, according to exit polls, a small but significant defection from a reliably Republican voting bloc that helped Biden flip the state blue by 10,457 votes. That was a very close one. So the idea that just a handful of Mormons could swing Arizona.
It's very true.
This is so fascinating to me because when have a handful of Mormons had a say in anything?
Exactly.
Right. Exactly.
This is so interesting.
Mormons, very Republican, but
generally
Trump is an outlier. He's not like any Republican before him. So they are I thought this was interesting. One segment of a tacit understanding between Christian voters and Trump, they would ignore his character defects and he would advance their policy priorities. Since 2020, though, Latter-day Saints say members of their religion have grown even more skeptical of the former president and ideas supported by surveys and other data. They were disturbed by his involvement in January 6th, his criminal indictments and felony convictions, which seem to validate their longstanding concerns about his character. And then traditional Latter-day Saint attitudes are changing regarding issues surrounding LGBTQ rights and divorce, with millennials and Gen Z. Subsection in here, will LDS women back Harris? This was my favorite section.
Interesting. This was a very interesting
This was
section.
great.
Yeah.
Allison Jones, a photographer who lives in Gilbert, east of Phoenix, said she thought a wave of Latter-day Saint women would cast their votes for Harris this November silently while their husbands would continue to support Trump. It's on the DL, Jones said, meaning the down low. There are going to be a lot of women who are getting their mail-in ballots. They're going to walk into that booth, and their husbands are never going to know what they did. Sherry McNabb, 47, a Mesa resident and corporate event manager, said she knew of women who had placed Post-it notes in the women's restrooms in churches reminding them that their husbands would not know for whom they voted. Love that.
Let's just pause and unpack that for a minute.
Let's unpack that.
We need to unpack
because
that.
I do not think women of our generation
I cannot imagine.
No.
care about that.
No.
But I have older in-laws
Yes.
and I could see it. I'm just saying I don't know it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying with the older generation and the way they are, I can see not feeling like they need to hide it, but just being private about it.
Yes.
If they know that their husband is a Trump supporter, I could see how that could happen. I don't know. This is so interesting.
It is so interesting.
Very interesting. I cannot imagine a world in which my husband and I could not share with each other who we voted for and have it be an issue.
Right.
Anyway, yeah. And then I just had to throw this in because let's get the other side of the coin.
Okay.
What about people who think Trump? Tara Fishbeck, 44 of Mesa, said she supported Trump because he was strong on the border, would protect freedom of speech, and believes in the nuclear family. His family is stalwart. They're amazing, she said. And I think that tells a lot about him as a person. No comment. I'll just leave it there. For people who know about Trump and his family.
And his nuclear family.
And his nuclear family. And his stalwart family.
Stalwart family. It's upstanding. They definitely, everything they do upholds a great traditional family values. And then this I thought was interesting. I don't know if you guys know much about local Arizona politics, but Rob Tabor, who is a strong Harris Wells supporter, organized about 50 people, many of them Latter-day Saints, to meet at his home in Gilbert to listen to a campaign speech from Ruben Gallego, the Democrat running for U.S. Senate against Republican Carrie Lake. Do you two know about Carrie Lake?
I know who Carrie Lake is.
Okay, good. She makes Trump look normal. So I know I'm
sadly true.
She's very, very
way
extreme.
too invested in Arizona politics, considering I live in California. But Carrie
Lake,
never
lived in Arizona.
But Carrie Lake is a train wreck I cannot turn away from. 2022 with Carrie Lake running for the governor, and then another psycho running for the Senate there. I'm heavily invested in Arizona. This I thought was also very interesting. A letter from the church's top leaders last year warned against blindly voting down the ballot for one party without carefully considering candidates and issues, calling such an act a threat to democracy. Some interpreted this as a nudge to not reflexively vote for Trump.
That was a good letter.
It was a good letter.
I mean, they always do a letter, but that one was different.
That one was very, very, very different.
Mm-hmm. And they do give a little mention to Romney. Last of all, I will talk about this. He did not say who he voted for in 2020, just that he did not vote for Trump. And on Wednesday, he declined to tell reporters in Washington if he would back Harris, which is interesting because I think a lot of very prominent never Trumpers have come out for Kamala now.
I'm really surprised he hasn't jumped on board.
If Dick Cheney's coming out to say vote for Kamala, where's Mitt in this? He needs
I'm
to
shocked
say
he hasn't jumped on board because he's not scared to stand apart in like the impeachment stuff.
No, he was not.
And he's not running for re-election.
He's not running for re-election. He's headed out to pasture to do whatever it is he's going to do.
I wonder if it's a timing thing. Is he waiting, or is he just like leave me alone. I'm retiring. I don't want to talk to
I
you.
don't know if you guys watched any of the DNC, but half of the speakers at the DNC were just Republicans talking about how they're voting for Kamala. So,
I didn't know what was going on
Step
during
up.
the week of the DNC. I can't remember. I had something going on. I didn't see any of it.
oh, I was mainlining DNC.
Oh,
coverage.
I believe it.
Straight into my veins.
Did
It was
this
great.
article have it? They didn't have a prediction, did they? Do they think more LDS will
I think they think
this
maybe
time?
more.
They think there's potential for
I
more.
think there's potential for more. And honestly,
Mhm.
women. It's
Yeah.
gonna be
Yeah,
women.
it's going to be the women.
Because it's a woman running, and okay, I don't know who thinks what about her politics. She's not my favorite, but how amazing would it be to have a woman in the White House? I mean, just the symbology alone makes me want to cry a little bit, even
Mhm.
though she's not my first choice. Anyway,
Okay.
I don't know how y'all feel, but
It would be very cool.
the idea of having a woman there, and I think a lot of other women feel the
Yeah.
same.
Mhm.
So,
Or just the idea of
not Trump.
not.
Anybody?
All right. Well, staying on that same political vein, there is another article that came out this week about a national study. And this national study finds that Latter-day Saints are the faith community most resilient to political division and polarization, believe it or not. So they stand out as a faith community most resilient to political division and polarization, both on the local and national level. So this was a national study, and it was done by a nonprofit, and they released the 139-page study surveying 6,000 believers across America. They intentionally oversampled the Latter-day Saints, which I find is really interesting, so that they could reach meaningful conclusions about faith among others. So this is some things that came out of this study are surprising, others that are not. Specifically, they found that only 1 in 10 Latter-day Saints supports the idea of faith leaders engaging in political discussions or candidate endorsements. And that is significantly contrasted with other religious groups where between a quarter and a third of the people answered affirmatively that they want their leaders engaging in political discussions or candidate endorsements. And they say probably a lot of this is due to the letter that we get read probably every 2 years before a general election, and sometimes even more frequently than that, from the first presidency that says, we believe in political neutrality. We are not telling anybody how to vote. We're telling you to go research the candidates and make the decision that is best for you. And it's kind of interesting because there are a lot of members of the church, I think, who appreciate that letter. But at the same time, if you follow some of the, shall we say, more extremist in politics, probably far right-wing extremists, who are members of the church in the social media setting, they do not like that letter. They feel like the church is being weak and that they need to stand up and they need to take a stance and they need to endorse candidates and they need to take a stronger stance. So I find that to be very interesting.
I have to say, I think that letter is wise. I feel like personally, the thing that got me out was feeling like there were politics being thrown in my face. I think the less they get involved with politics, the better.
Exactly.
So I always looked forward to that letter, but it doesn't surprise me that people want to feel validated for their choices.
Exactly.
Of very specific candidates.
No, I think it's really smart at the church. They are not in the business of and especially because this is a worldwide church. You can't comment on every political situation in every country. And again, a lot of people say, oh, well, they just do that for their nonprofit status. Well, yeah, it does protect their nonprofit status. But I legit think that they think, we're about Jesus. We're not about politics. Now, politics factor in, and we want religious freedom, and we want leaders who will support religious freedom. But a leader supporting religious freedom doesn't always have an R behind their name. It could very well have a D behind their name. So that's why we are encouraged to, again, research out the candidates, understand their positions, make the choice that you feel is best for you. Anyway, the other thing too is that this said that another degree of division is an us versus them mentality. And they said that members feel actually very unified, and that they don't feel a really us versus them dynamic. And that when they feel that us versus them dynamic, it's more on a personal level. And that's reflected in lingering tensions about larger cultural debates and individual struggles to reconcile their religious beliefs with things like, immigration or loving people regardless of their background, but yet advocating, only for marriage between a man and a woman. And the other interesting thing is the members of the church felt that there was a lot, that there wasn't divisiveness in their ward and stakes, that they felt that it was inclusive and they had unity regardless of political beliefs. And that makes me happy because not everybody gets to have that experience. You obviously didn't have that experience.
Well, my ward itself, for the most part, was super cool. It was the larger Prop 8. We're talking about Prop 8. So my ward was actually really cool. I was in the north end of Boise at the time. It was a very liberal ward. People there didn't necessarily agree with the stance, but it didn't matter because we lived in Idaho, not California. The thing that really made me mad was there was someone in my Relief Society who used the Relief Society listserv to ask for phone banks. But she was an outlier and she got yelled at.
As well she should.
I actually wrote back to her and I said, not everybody agrees with this, so maybe don't use the Relief Society listserv for this particular thing. Anyway, so I actually do believe that, because I think where you live, locally, you're always going to surround yourself. I mean, neighborhoods, you tend to be surrounded by like-minded people in your own personal neighborhood. So I think that makes a lot of sense to me, that in their wards, they're feeling more unified than maybe on the whole.
Even though there's political divisions in their wards. Like I in my ward there, I can tell you exactly where all of the political divisions lie. And I love every single one of them. The people.
Yeah. We've got a mix in our ward too.
Yeah. You probably even have more of a mix than I do in my ward.
I live in a purple district. One of the very few in the state of Idaho.
Yes.
Well, I lived in one of the very few blue districts in Idaho.
Well, I live in a very red district in Idaho. So I guess we covered all the gamuts.
Your red district in Idaho is very fun.
Balanced out your very blue district. All right. So, our next one, that's mine too. We are going to talk about the temple in McKinney, Texas. Now, McKinney, Texas is right outside of Dallas, and President Nelson announced a temple some time ago. This is what I found really interesting before I get into kind of the legal analysis of this. I got this one tonight because this is all about planning and zoning and legal stuff, and you two, your eyes were rolling in the back of your head.
We bore.
I'm going to make
I don't know.
We get bored of this.
I'm going to make it make sense to you. When I recorded with Georgia last time, I talked about land use planning issues in Florida. And afterwards, she's like, thank you. I did not understand that article.
That. I listened
but
to
after you explained it to me, I'm like, okay, I get this now. So the temple in Dallas was opened in 1984, and I think it's identical to our temple in Boise, which opened around the same time. Our Boise temple is a small temple, especially compared to the second temple we have in the area, which is Meridian. So I cannot fathom the fact that Dallas, for the last 30 years, has had this teeny, actually almost 40 years, has had this teeny tiny temple.
They have a lot of members.
They do, because when it opened, they had 132,000 members. Today, they have 385,000 members. So it must be quite a trip to get into, make an appointment at the Dallas temple. Anyway, so that is one of the reasons that the church wanted to have a new temple in the Dallas area. So they submitted all of their applications to the town of Fairview, even though they're calling it the McKinney, Texas temple. It's actually in Fairview. And so they submitted all of their stuff. The staff. So when you submit something for planning and zoning, there is a development staff that goes through your application, gets everything in order, tells you, hey, this is a problem, that's not a problem. And then they make a recommendation, usually to the town council. And so the staff report had correctly concluded that the church met all the legal requirements necessary for approval. So there's no reason why this temple shouldn't have been approved. And what's really interesting in McKinney, Texas, is in their zoning, they do not have any zoning where a church is permitted. And that doesn't mean you can't have have a church. It just means anywhere you want to put a church, you will be going through a process called obtaining a conditional use permit. And you have to obtain that permit. Now, if there was a zone where they said, hey, churches can, be in residential zones, in commercial zones, whatever the zoning ordinance is that allowed churches in that particular zone, then they would not need a conditional use permit. But they needed a conditional use permit. The staff said they met all the legal requirements, and the town council unanimously denied the conditional use permit. Well, this made the church, they were not pleased with this decision, so they hired themselves a lawyer in Texas, a local lawyer who wrote a letter to the town council and said, look, this is problematic that you denied this because you've got some issues with your zoning ordinances where you permit sexually related industries within certain zones, but you don't allow any churches without a conditional use permit. And so this attorney wrote a letter to the council members and said, I think that you are denying some First Amendment freedom of religion. And you might want to reconsider, asking them to reconsider. Now, the church hasn't decided for sure the route that they want to take. If they want to appeal this and go to the courts and take that route to the courts to say, courts, you need to look at the zoning in Fairview, Texas, because every other type of business has an area that they can be zoned in except for a church, which requires churches to have conditional use permits, which are very subjective. And what was really,
which is so interesting because there's so many churches, like different kinds of churches in Texas. And I'm assuming in this town too.
Yes.
You'd think that would have, that they would be zoned.
Exactly. And no church, not just the LDS church, any church who wants to build a building has to obtain a conditional use permit because of their zoning ordinances. Now, of course, the city council says, oh, we didn't deny you because you're Mormon. We just don't like the height of your building and we don't like your steeple. It's not aesthetically pleasing to us.
Do you think they'd be doing this? I mean, I imagine that if somebody tried to build a mosque in Fairview, they would probably be turning them down too. I wonder.
Anyway, there were 10 factors that the town council had to consider when it votes on a conditional use permit. The church met 9 of those 10 factors. The only factor that it did not meet, and the reason that they denied it, was for aesthetic appearance of use and other sensory effects that it may have on the established character of the neighborhood. So,
and that's subjective, right?
And that is so
that
subjective. That's very subjective. So, like I said, the church is reconsidering its options because a court fight is going to be long and protracted. They need to clearly get another temple down there. So, I don't know if it'll be interesting to see what the church does. If the church circles back and says, okay, let's pick another site. But then, of course, there's lots of site planning and a couple years of work that go into that. Or whether the church says, we need to draw a line in the sand and we need to run this up the flagpole for religious freedom because we feel like maybe this denial was a violation of our religious freedom. So this is a stay tuned. We will see what the church does. The lawyer geek in me is loving all of these land planning issues that are coming up recently with temples, or last time it was with zoning in Orlando, Florida, and the church was asking to have 52,000 acres annexed into the city. So
I almost understood the story that time you explained it.
That was better than when we read it.
Yes. All right. Ariane, you have the next one.
I have the next couple of stories. These are women-related articles. And these were from the Salt Lake Tribune. And, they had this was a summary. They do their Mormon Land podcast once a week. And then they always turn the podcast into a brief article.
Yes.
So these 2 articles were just some short summaries of the past couple of podcast episodes they did. So if you really want the lengthy go listen to their podcast because these were really good ones. So the first one they had last week, shortly after the Restore conference, they had Nylan McBain on their podcast talking about her work on women's issues in the church. She has been around a while trying to create awareness and, just awareness in general about women's issues in the church. She wrote a book way back in 2014, 10 years ago, called Women at Church, Magnifying LDS Women's Local Impact. So she was a really interesting interview because she's been kind of fighting this fight for, over a decade now. She's a faithful member of the church. But she started way back in 2012 is when she started really kind of trying to think about some of these women's issues and what we can do. And so she says right off the bat in this interview with the Salt Lake Tribune, the first thing that has to happen is for members of the church to acknowledge that our faith is a patriarchy. I think sometimes that gets brushed off, right? We don't live in a patriarchy. Women are treated equal. Well, just if you look at the definition of a patriarchy, our church has a patriarchal structure.
It does have a patriarchal structure.
So number one, she's been trying to educate people on that and what that means for the past decade.
Acknowledge.
And just to help people see the extent of that penetrates our organizational structure. Doctrine aside, just the organizational structure of the church, how does this affect it? And she points out things to them the visual representations we see in the scriptures, the visual representations we see in leadership at church, who's speaking, what viewpoints we're getting. So she's been pointing that out for a while, but she also talks about the progress we've made over the past 10 years. But I thought this was a really interesting little tidbit she shared. About 2 years before she wrote her book, she was invited to speak at a Fair Mormon conference about amplifying women's participation in the church. So she gets up and she gives her speech. And this is one of her very first public, really trying to make this point publicly. And then they took note cards. They submitted questions for her as the speaker at the end, and they collected these note cards and brought them up to her. And the very first one she got at the top of her stack said, "You are an apostate." And that's all it said. This was back in 2012. And then she wrote her book came out 2 years later, and then she's just carried on ever since. But I just thought that was a funny story. But she does talk about while we haven't seen any major structural changes to the church in the past decade since she's been doing this. Obviously, we don't have the priesthood, but she talks about all of the tiny, small changes that have been happening, mostly on a local level throughout the church. Women are being asked to speak more. Sometimes women are holding babies while they're getting blessed. Obviously, we've made some changes. Women can be witnesses now to baptisms. And so she talked about that. And then it was just a really interesting, that was just a tiny bit of the interview. It was just an interesting interview on her work over the past decade and kind of what she's seen change and what it's been like to be, out there trying to advocate for women's issues in the church. So I have heard her on so many podcasts, and every time I hear her, I really enjoy her.
And see, I don't think I've ever heard her on a podcast. So I'm going to have to go listen to that Mormon Land one.
She's so well-spoken and just really, she's just really good. Okay. So the second Mormon Land one also focused on women's issues. This one came out this week, just yesterday, I think. They interviewed a woman who is the first, her name is Jenna Carson, and she studied, she went to Harvard Divinity School, and she was one of the very first female chaplains in the prison system, female LDS chaplains in the prison system. And she felt called to become a military chaplain after she did that. But it was before that was approved by the church had women serving in prison chaplains, but they weren't in the military. Well, that had like she stuck it out over the years. She
Good for her.
She went to her Harvard Divinity School. She was like hoping to someday be a military chaplain. And in 2021, she got the go ahead from Salt Lake City. And now she has spent the past 2 years being a chaplain in the Air Force, the first female LDS chaplain in the Air Force. And this was such an interesting interview. She talked about her experiences in the prison. She talked about her current experience in the Air Force. So I have not, like, obviously I have not, no military experience.
None of us do.
I have never like totally understood the role of chaplain, but military chaplain are supposed to be very neutral, she said.
Oh, okay.
She said they don't always follow that policy, but regardless of what their faith is, they are supposed to be a very neutral spiritual leader.
Okay.
So even though she is LDS, was raised LDS, that's her personal belief system. When she is serving as a chaplain in the military, she is not there to preach. She is not there to convert anybody to become a member of our church. She is there to provide very general, generic spiritual guidance and to help them on their spiritual journeys.
Whatever that spiritual journey may be.
So in theory, like, she could be guiding Muslims.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Buddhists.
In fact, she says that she has very few LDS.
I'm sure very few LDS,
right.
but like, other like non-Christian religions as well.
In theory, yeah. All spiritual. She's there for all. So, she says she's more like a counselor. Like she listens a lot, lots of problems, and then just helps try to guide in whatever direction is going to be helpful for them with their spirituality, with the things they're dealing with. And I thought it was really interesting. She said that in the military, they put a lot of trust and faith in their chaplains because they are the only people in the military that have complete confidentiality, like blanket coverage for confidentiality. She said they are not required to report. It sounds like she's not required to report anything, but I could have interpreted that wrong.
Interesting.
Anyways, she said because of that, there really is a lot of faith put in the chaplains. Like people really turn to them to discuss hard things. So I thought that was so interesting. But then she also talked about her time serving in prison. Her very first assignment was serving as a chaplain in a prison, and it was an all-male prison. And she was in charge of running a Sunday service for them. And again, she said most of them were not LDS that came to this Sunday service. She was there to like preach. Like she would just do a sermon every Sunday for these men in this prison. And she said it was very intimidating at first.
I can only imagine.
Absolutely.
But then she also talked about the dynamics of then in Sunday afternoons, she would go to her ward. And the interviewers asked her, like, okay, what is that like? You're in charge in the morning, and then you go to your ward, and you're living in a different world where, like, you would not be in charge. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure
what was her answer to that?
I'm sure she gets curious in her ward.
What her answer to that was?
Well, I thought it was so interesting. She said, personally, it's for me a relief because I'm in charge all morning, and I just want to go sit in a pew and do nothing. Which I totally get. But then she said at the same time, it is a real like mind shift. Like being able to be a female and run a congregation there and not in her home ward. But I mean, she has a great perspective on it. She's not, bent out of shape about it, but she did say it is an interesting dynamic. But also I found interesting, she talked about, remember Annette Dennis's speech that ruffled feathers?
Sister
Dennis, when she gave the speech about priesthood power and how we all have priesthood power.
And that was at April conference.
Is that the one with the Instagram post?
Yes. The Instagram post that went wild.
Instagram post that I went to and saw every person I've ever known who was Mormon in the comments section. Talking about why they're not Mormon anymore.
The wild comment section. Yes. Well, and she said it was really interesting. She was very much able to acknowledge how that was really hard for a lot of women in the church. Yeah. But she also said that for her, she did not have those feelings because she is in charge. Like she really does feel like she has that priesthood power in her. Not in her church calling, but in her chaplain,
military.
Yeah, in her chaplain calling. So those words hit differently for her, but she 100% understood why they hit differently for her than for some women. Yeah. it was like just the most interesting interview. I think
Okay.
y'all should go listen to it.
Okay.
So
Okay.
just lots of things to think about.
All
And
right.
so fun to hear that perspective that is so rare. So
No, I really like that.
mhm.
Okay. Ciaran, Mormons in the media.
Again, I get to pick my stories. And I'm the LA girl, so I'm picking this one. The stars are out of the church. Hollywood fame and Mormonism can be a tough combo. I love this because I definitely have done the thing where I go to Wikipedia and try and figure out all of the famous Mormons and ex-Mormons.
Yes, we all do.
So
Who
I
doesn't?
thought this was a great article. The author says, my quest has always been to find just one person who is mainstream famous and goes to church. This gets messy for a few reasons. The first is that it seems tricky to be a fully active member of the church and fully famous, thanks to the rock and roll lifestyle of the religion's straight-lacedness. Oh, goodness, forbids. Let's think through some famous members. Off the top of my head, we have the born Latter-day Saint Hollywooders, Ryan Gosling, Katherine Heigl, Aaron Eckhart, Amy Adams, Dustin Lance Black, the athletes, Jimmer Fredette, Taysom Hill, Bryce Harper, the musicians, Dan Reynolds, David Archuleta, Brandon Flowers. Out of this list, I think the only one who is fully famous and fully a member is Flowers, who I guess needs to teach a class of some sort, perhaps how to stay in the church when you've seen how unboring life can be. I struggle to think of a mainstream influencer who's made it big and still wears temple garments. I thought this paragraph was really hilarious. I have to read it. I recently saw a cringy reel about how Blake Lively supposedly went to church in Los Angeles because her brother's sister's dad's friend is a member. I have personally posted the Ryan Gosling talent show clip a dozen times and don't plan to stop. Latter-day Saints apocryphally claimed Steve Martin as one of their own for decades before enough people had the internet to prove it wrong. I loved this paragraph because I think about this all the time. Here is where I find myself mourning the loss of the term Mormon. I wish that instead of giving up the word, we could have demoted it to a cultural moniker. I like the idea of a bigger tent term, a word that acknowledges how extensively this religion marks its members, even sometimes after they leave. I want to shout my support for saints of any stripe who are contributing to art or culture from my tiny platform, and yet I sometimes fear, for lack of a synonym, outing them, or potentially worse, claiming them when they'd rather distance themselves. I think that's really great.
We need to pause and unpack.
Yes.
We need to
That
pause
is
and unpack.
so well said.
I know,
Yes.
right? The term Mormon, I don't consider myself a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but I do, for lack of a better word, consider myself to be Mormon because how do you get rid of it? You can't. It is a useful term, and I know that a lot of people who are not members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints use that as a broad term to identify themselves. I know that Sunstone, I don't know if this is still their tagline, but I know for a long time under the stewardship of Lindsay Hansen Park, their tagline was more than one way to Mormon, because there are so many offshoots. There are so many people who leave but are still culturally Mormon that it is a very useful term. And it, in this case, would be very helpful to say, hey, Ryan Gosling's a Mormon. He's not active Mormon, but he's a Mormon.
Well, and it goes to, this show is called This Week in Mormons. And when President Nelson announced the church name, our show got a lot of flack for, why aren't you changing your name? You should be changing your name. You should be complying. Well, we've kept it that way because we view the term Mormon in the cultural sense, just like what this article talks about. Because yes, we cover a lot of stories about people who are actively participating in the church, but we also cover a lot of stories that I like to call maybe Mormon adjacent or fall under that big umbrella where maybe you're not active in the church, but just like you still identify as Mormon. And so it's more of to me, I like it more of as a big tent that pulls in a lot of people who have that identification, not just necessarily active members of the church.
Right. Well, and it's really interesting too on this article. It's just been on my mind a lot on the heels of, the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, which we've already talked about. We've discussed.
Well, you haven't discussed it.
Oh,
I discussed
you
it.
discussed it with
I
Georgia.
discussed it.
That's right.
But I think we need to revisit it just a bit for a couple of reasons. First of all, when I discussed it with Georgia, I had only watched one episode and I wasn't sure if I was going to watch more. And then you and I have both finished.
We watched the whole thing. I mean, did you doubt me, really? Of course I was going to watch the whole thing. I love trashy TV.
Anyway, so share your thoughts.
Well, my thoughts on this, it's just been really interesting to watch how this has kind of hit us culturally. It seems to be there are a couple of camps within the church, and a lot of what I've seen, like in comment sections and stuff, members of the church are very upset about this show, and obviously the church put out a statement. I really loved
the church put out a statement.
Well, not directly to the show, but it was to the show.
No, it came out the same day as the trailer was released.
It was basically like, we're not always represented the way that
we would like to be represented in the media.
We have no control, that kind of a thing. And the backlash from the members, like some members are very, very upset about it. And I think we can sometimes take it really personally, like how dare they call themselves? Oh, they're not really Mormons. Like they feel the need to get in the comments and defend, or to their friends. Well, those aren't really Mormon. That's not really what we do. I think, I don't know. I feel like the general public is smart enough to know that this is probably not like mainstream Mormons. Probably don't always behave this way. But at the same time, like, what right do we have to say they're not more, like, if they want to claim themselves as Mormon, that is their right. Like, like they're in charge. They get to decide. Like, it's not for us. And I think it makes us look so judgy and bad when we like get so defensive. Like they're not with us. They're not with us.
They're not with us.
Because it makes us look so unchrist-like. Like if like we might not agree with their decisions, but that doesn't mean they can't be with us.
I find it to be even more interesting since the church discarded the term Mormon, that Mormons are still like that. You threw that term out. You no longer get to have stewardship over it. You said bye-bye to that term. You no longer control the narrative about who gets to use the word Mormon and what it means. Like you lost that right when you said we don't use that word anymore. So my thoughts.
But I really like Georgia's take on it too. When you interviewed with her, how she just liked that, like, for outsiders, she weren't as concerned about like what are outsiders going to think. She more kind of just liked that for outsiders, it gives them more of
normalized
a nuanced view of members of the church. Well, I thought that was a really interesting take that she had, and I can appreciate that.
Exactly. And I have to tell you, having, watched the show, and when I first recorded, from what I can tell, the first episode of this show was recorded probably a year to a year and a half before episodes 2 through 7. Because what I think happened is I think they recorded the initial episode probably as a pilot. They were trying to sell it. They finally sold it. By the time they sold it, it had been a year and a half down the road, and they come back. Because episodes 2 through 7 have a very different vibe than the first episode. The first episode was like super churchy, lots of temples, lots of crosses that I was like, apparently you don't understand. We don't put the cross on our building, but okay, whatever. And it was all about the swinger scandal. By the time you got to episode 2, they weren't talking about the swinger scandal anymore. They had moved on from that. And so I think that episode was recorded probably right after, or very, very close in time to the whole swinger scandal. And what's really interesting is Taylor Frankie Paul, who was the center of the first episode and the center of the swinger scandal. I went into this being prepared to really not like this woman. And I really liked her.
I liked her too.
I liked her.
I thought, I felt bad for her.
I know.
She's made some tough life choices, and she's paying for them.
And she's paying the consequences of them.
She seemed like a nice person with a good heart.
She was acknowledging that she was paying the consequences for some really bad choices that she made. And I kind of appreciated that, because sometimes you don't really see that. The other thing that surprised me that didn't come out as much in the first episode. So there's 8 women in this group, and 4 of them are no longer active, no longer, actively participating on a regular basis. but 4 of them are still actively participating on a regular basis. And so that was really interesting to see as well, and to see the dynamic between all of them and how activity versus non-activity played into their group dynamic. Not all the time, but there were undercurrents of it. And I'm glad, this is going to sound awful, I'm glad I watched episodes 2 through 7.
It was really interesting.
It was.
So yeah, it's just super interesting to tie that into this article about like, yeah, who do we claim? Who do we not claim? Like, it's not our job to say who's in and who's out.
Exactly. Well, and we before we leave this topic and move on, I have to say, Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, their new season 5 premiered this week, and Ariane and I downloaded it on my iPad, and on the plane to California, I gave her one earbud and I took the other, and we watched the season premiere of season 5. And it was so funny.
We were laughing.
There
were some zingers.
There were some real zingers. So
5 seasons already.
I know, 5 seasons already.
They're wildly popular
They
amongst the housewife franchises.
Yes.
They are like, they have risen to the top.
See that.
Yes.
See that.
Anyway, so all right. Well, should we move on to I don't have any Mormons behaving badly this week.
That's so great. We love that.
We do. We love that. I haven't had a real good Mormon behaving badly in a while. They've all been behaving themselves, so we like that. So before we move on to favorite things, we have a little nostalgia moment tonight that we have to have. So I saw these things in Idaho. I did not want to haul them on the plane to California, but I said I would if Ciaran couldn't find them down here. She found them down here.
Target.
Now, before I show you what it is we have that we're going to try, the reason that this is nostalgia for us is our Grandma Hales always kept a cupboard full of Fruit Loops. And so whenever you spent the night at her house, you got a bowl the next morning that you could fill with Fruit Loops and milk. And so I smell Fruit Loops and boom, I am a little kid at my grandma's house again. So,
I should have pre-opened these.
You probably should have, but that's okay. What we have is the Fruit Loops. Sorry, Ciaran, I'm blocking you. Scoops, which they are not shaped like Fruit Loops. They're shaped like Tricks, like the little round balls for Tricks. It says it cools in your mouth, and the flavor is rainbow sherbet.
Now, this worries me.
Okay, why does this worry you? You talk about that while I open
the box. I'll tell you why this worries me. The box says it cools in your mouth.
Yeah, what does that mean?
I bought a box of icy cereal at the store like a couple of months ago because I just thought it would be funny for my kids to try. Like, oh, icy flavored cereal. It was the same. Cools in your mouth. Not great.
Oh.
Yeah, I do not understand what you mean.
Okay.
And
Smell these. Before you taste them, smell them.
They don't smell as good as regular Fruit Loops.
They don't have the Fruit Loops smell.
They don't.
Okay.
They smell different.
Okay. Ciaran, take some and try some.
All right. Oops.
No. That's
Yeah.
a no.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
not.
for me.
I'm not getting. Oh no, I am getting the cooling in your
I got
mouth.
the cooling in your mouth.
It's like menthol. It's like they put menthol in the cereal.
Oh, it's disgusting.
I don't want the rest of these.
That was a major fail. Stick with the regular traditional Fruit Loops, folks.
Ew.
We saved you from disaster. Don't buy those.
Yeah.
Or don't buy the icy cereal either.
Don't buy the rainbow sherbet scoops, cools in your mouth Fruit Loops. Be a traditionalist. Stick with regular Fruit Loops.
Oh dear.
Okay, that is so bizarre. The mint.
Yes.
That is weird.
It's not good.
No.
Okay.
Not good. Not good.
All right, so let's do favorite things.
Okay. My favorite thing, I'll go first.
Okay.
That I'm sharing this month is a Instagram account. I cannot believe I have not shared this yet because it's been on my radar for a few months now. One of my good friends from Oregon, Charlotte, she is a gem. She started an Instagram account several months ago. It's called Outstretched, and her tagline under it is roadmap to peaceful spiritual deconstruction in the LDS faith. And by deconstruction, don't be scared. This isn't like, I'm going to help you leave the church account. That's not what it is at all. She's a faithful member of the church. But she went through her own kind of faith journey and transition. And she just kind of started this account to just kind of help others through it. It's more about like rebuilding your faith
Oh, okay.
in your own way, whatever that way may be. And it's like she talks a lot about trusting yourself and learning to like listen to yourself and find yourself spiritually. She talks about like, the stages of spiritual development. She talks about making room for all, like lots of discussions about like, how do you navigate this when family members are in or out, or a mixture, and like, how do you make room for everybody and all of their nuanced beliefs within the church? It is so positive and uplifting. And she is a beautiful writer. So her posts are just so well written, and it's a lovely account. So I recommend it for everybody. I just think it's very educational and helpful if you are navigating some tough stuff, or if you have a loved one or a friend navigating things. It's
Love it.
wonderful. So that's Outstretched on
Okay.
Instagram.
And I will speaking of Instagram, I will do an Instagram on our twin sisters that has our favorite things on there.
Okay.
Okay, Ciaran, your turn.
Okay, I have a podcast recommendation. It is we're approaching spooky season. So I have a podcast. I was telling Ariane, this podcast is basically This American Life with ghost stories.
Oh.
It's called Otherworld. And it's people telling their paranormal stories. Now, it's anything and everything. There's stories about ghosts. There's stories about like Bigfoot, obviously.
Okay.
We've got stories about alien sightings. We've got stories about fairies, just everything.
Wow.
And some of
this
it's
sounds fun.
Some of it's scary. I'm not gonna lie. Some of the episodes you're like, I can't sleep tonight.
Oh, well, that's not good.
Some of the episodes are heartwarming. People who have like talked to dead relatives, like had visions with their dead relatives, near-death experiences, which I am fascinated by.
Oh, I'm so fascinated by near-death experiences.
Okay, I'm going to recommend an episode to you. I don't know it off the top of my head, but after we get off pod, I will share with you this near-death episode that just happened.
You need to curate them because
I will curate them. I won't send you the scary ones.
Okay.
But it's just really an interesting. It's been going for about 2 years now.
Okay.
The host, he makes no judgments. He does not have an opinion one way or the other. He just lets these people tell their stories. If he can try to like find a rational explanation for it, he'll try tracking that down. But the idea is just tell your story. I personally don't believe in ghosts, and this hasn't necessarily changed my mind on ghosts, but it has made me think about it differently.
Okay.
So, you don't have to be a believer in the paranormal to enjoy a good story.
It's very true.
And that's what this podcast is. It's great stories.
Interesting.
So look it up, Otherworld.
Okay.
I'll send you a link to the Instagram as well. You can post that on the...
All right.
Yeah.
I will do that. Okay. Mine is a podcast as well.
Mm.
So KSL a couple of years ago, when they followed the mom that disappeared. Oh, why can't I think of
Cold.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Cold. Anyway, so ever since then, they've done a couple of true crime podcasts. Well, their latest true crime podcast is called Ransom. And it came out, probably several months ago, and I just haven't had a chance to listen to it. Well, I finally, in the last week and a half, have had a chance to listen to it. And it is, if you are a true crime fan, it's a great podcast. I mean, I don't want to say amazing because the premises is so sad. It is about this 12-year-old little boy back in the early 90s in Texas who is kidnapped, and his parents get a ransom telephone call. Sadly, he is killed and is not returned to his parents. And it is the unraveling of who it was that did this, because it was a very close family friend who did it. So, and kind of all the different motivations behind that, and how everybody kind of moved through their grief and how this impacted them and affected their lives. Anyway, if you're a true crime fan, like I said, I have enjoyed listening to the podcast. The guy who puts it together is a guy by the name of Art Ransom. He was actually a reporter in the Dallas area, I believe, when this kidnapping occurred in the early 90s. So it was something his television station covered extensively, and so he came in and did the podcast for Rascone. Art Rascone, that's who it is. He came in and he did the podcast for KSL. So that's my recommendation.
Okay.
All right. Well, Ciaran, we have thoroughly enjoyed having you here tonight.
I have thoroughly enjoyed being here.
Now, as you know, we like to do a Patreon episode. So will you stick around for our Patreon episode? We got a couple
Where else
stories.
am I going to go?
Yeah, you're stuck.
She's stuck now.
If you could see the room, you can only see part of the room, but there is no way she can get out of where she's sitting right now. So she's gonna stick around for Patreon whether she wants to or not. But then again, she is our youngest sister, and she's very good at taking direction and just listening to what her two older sisters have to say.
You know, I was just telling someone the other day I am a true youngest child.
That's very true. It's like I can be bossed around. I'm used to it. That happened from the day I was born. Anyway, we're gonna cover a couple fun stories about teenage Latter-day Saints and kind of great things that they're doing in the Patreon episode. So that is for our Patreon subscribers. If you'd like to become a Patreon subscriber, you can join, throw a couple bucks a month our way just to keep the lights on and our technology going. Because trust me, we don't get compensated for this podcast at all.
I'm not getting paid.
You're not getting paid. It's true.
Shocker.
Shocker. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach out at contact@thisweekinmormons.com and we will respond to those, or at the very least read them. In fact, I got 2 amazing emails from listeners who really had enjoyed my podcast with Georgia. So I want to let those listeners know that I read those. I had a super busy last couple of weeks because I did want to respond and I didn't get a chance, but I do want to acknowledge those 2 listeners who sent in some super nice comments. So I appreciate that. And then, of course, you can find us on the Facebook, and we have our twin sister Instagram account, which we will post our favorite things on. So listeners, thank you very much for joining us tonight, and we appreciate it.
Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.